The auditorium buzzed with restless chatter, cameras flashing as yet another talent hopeful left the stage. The judges sighed, weary from countless performances. Then, quiet footsteps. A thin young boy, barefoot, his shirt too large for his frame, walked nervously to the center. The audience chuckled softly, assuming another awkward act. But then, he lifted the microphone. His small hands trembled as the first guitar chords filled the room. The moment his voice rang out, low, haunting, almost fragile, the laughter dissolved into stunned silence. It wasn't just a song. It was a story pouring from his soul. Every lyric carried something raw, something broken, yet achingly beautiful. It felt as though he was singing for every unheard child, every forgotten dream. Parents in the crowd instinctively reached for their children's hands. Tears welled up uninvited. The boy closed his eyes, and for a fleeting moment, the stage lights reflected in them like stars. He wasn't just performing. He was surviving, remembering, honoring someone unseen. The audience didn't just hear Hotel California. They felt the weight of sacrifice hidden in the melody. By the final note, no one clapped. Not yet. Instead, silence hung like a prayer, every heart pierced, every soul suspended. That was when the boy whispered softly, almost to himself, "For you, Papa." And suddenly, the story behind the song began to unfold. The silence after his whispered words felt heavier than thunder. The boy stood on stage, his eyes glistening as if holding back an ocean. A judge leaned forward, her voice breaking gently through the stillness. "Who is Papa?" she asked. The boy gripped the microphone tighter, his knuckles pale. "He used to sing this song," he murmured, his voice trembling but clear enough for all to hear. "He worked nights playing in small bars, to send me to school. He said one day I would sing better than him." But, his breath hitched, and for a moment he couldn't continue. The audience waited, frozen in collective anticipation. "But he never came home last year. A car accident. I promised I would sing this for him, one day, on a big stage. So he could hear me, wherever he is." The words pierced the room like arrows of truth. A man in the front row covered his mouth, tears spilling freely. A mother clutched her chest. The judges exchanged looks, their hardened expressions melted into empathy. Suddenly, the boy lowered his gaze, ashamed. "I know my voice is not perfect. I just wanted him to be proud." His humility cracked the hearts of everyone present. The audience, who moments earlier had doubted him, now rose one by one. Applause thundered, not for technical skill, but for courage, for love, for sacrifice that transcended sound. The boy looked up, startled by the standing ovation. For the first time that night, he smiled, a small, trembling smile that shone brighter than the stage lights. And in that moment, though barefoot and frail, he stood taller than anyone in the room. He wasn't just a singer, he was his father's living legacy. The boy stepped off the stage, his heart pounding louder than the ovation that still echoed behind him. Backstage, the producers, crew members, even fellow contestants stared at him, not with envy, but with awe. He sat quietly in the corner, clutching the small wooden guitar his father once owned, its strings worn but still carrying a heartbeat of memories. As he tuned it absent-mindedly, he whispered to himself, "I did it, Papa. I really did." Suddenly, one of the judges appeared, still dabbing tears from her eyes. She knelt beside him, speaking softly. "Your voice, it carried more than music. It carried love, sacrifice, and truth. Do you know what that means?" The boy shook his head shyly. She smiled, placing her hand gently on his shoulder. It means you gave this audience something they'll never forget. You reminded them of what matters most. Meanwhile, out in the theater lobby, strangers were still processing what they had witnessed. Conversations broke out between people who had never spoken before. Some recalled loved ones they had lost, others thought about sacrifices their parents had made. The boys' song had not just entertained, it had united hearts in shared humanity. As the night closed, the boy walked outside into the cool air, clutching his guitar. A man approached slowly, with cautious steps. His eyes were tired, yet kind, and he held a folded paper in his hands. "Son," the man said, his voice trembling, I knew your father." The boy froze, his breath catching in his throat. The man unfolded the paper, revealing an old photo of himself and the boy's father performing together in a dusty bar years ago. "He was my brother," the man whispered. "And I think it's time you knew the rest of his story." The boy's hands trembled as he stared at the worn photograph, the edges frayed with time. His father's familiar smile leapt from the picture, standing beside a man who now looked at him with tear-filled eyes. "Your father and I were inseparable," the man said, his voice low and heavy. "We played music together in every bar that would take us. He always spoke of you, always said you were his greatest song." The boy's lips quivered. "But, why didn't I ever see you? Why weren't you there, when he was gone?" The question pierced the night, raw and trembling. The man bowed his head, guilt clouding his face. "I was ashamed. I chose a different path. While your father worked hard for his family, I wasted my life chasing empty things. When he died, I couldn't bring myself to face you or your mother. I thought I had no right." The boy clutched his father's guitar tightly to his chest, torn between anger and longing. Silence stretched, until the man's voice cracked again. "But tonight, hearing you, it was like hearing him again. You gave me back a piece of my brother. Please, let me be here now, not to replace him, but to honor him with you." The boy's eyes brimmed with tears, but this time not from grief alone. Slowly, he reached out his small hand, placing it into the man's trembling one. "Papa always said, family is more than mistakes. If you really loved him, then sing with me. Sing for him." The man's breath broke, and for the first time in years, he felt forgiven. Together, under the dim glow of the streetlights, uncle and nephew strummed the same guitar, their voices trembling yet strong, two broken souls stitching themselves back together through the legacy of one man's love. The next evening, the boy was invited back to the stage, this time not alone. The audience, still moved from the night before, filled every seat, anticipation thick in the air. The judges whispered among themselves, unsure what to expect. Then, the spotlight rose. And there he was again, the small barefoot boy clutching his father's guitar. Beside him stood the man with weary eyes, holding a second microphone, his hands shaking as though holding more than just nerves. The boy glanced up at him with quiet trust, and the hall fell silent. Together, they began. The first chords of Hotel California rippled once more, but this time the song carried an even deeper weight. The boy's voice soared, raw yet angelic, while the man's deeper tone wove around it like a missing harmony finally found. They weren't flawless, but they were real. Every lyric told a story of loss, forgiveness, and family rediscovered. By the chorus, people were no longer just listening, they were weeping, embracing strangers beside them, recording the moment as if capturing a miracle. The judges, unable to contain themselves, stood in ovation before the final note had even ended. When the music stopped, the boy whispered into the microphone, "Papa, your brother is home. And your song lives on." The man broke down, falling to his knees, but the boy pulled him into an embrace. The crowd erupted, not just in applause, but in something pure, a shared reminder that kindness, forgiveness, and love have the power to heal even the deepest wounds. That performance spread far beyond the theater, reaching millions. But more important than fame was the legacy carried forward, a father's sacrifice, a son's courage, and an uncle's redemption. Together, they proved that no voice, however small, sings alone when it carries love.